This lecture is going to talk about footwear marks in particular when we're talking about impression evidence, because impressions can include fingerprints, tire marks, dental impressions, but this one we'll just focus on footwear. So the overview. Um, Footwear evidence actually may be hard to use as evidence because footwear marks can be hard to see, or they're in an area where there's lots of footprints and they can actually be unrelated to the crime because somebody passed through, left a mark, so that has to be deciphered. The database that's used to identify some of the footwear marks are, that are logged is SICAR, S-I-C-A-R, and there will be a log of what the brand is and the shoe print pattern, or the sole pattern. And footwear marks can actually reveal a bunch of different things. It can help us with how many people were at a crime scene, the direction of approach and departure, and the point and mode of entry and exit of the crime scene. So point, where they entered and exit, and mode is how they actually came in. And then, of course, sequence of events. If there's a pattern somewhere, we might be able to figure out the trail, where it began, where it ended, according to that. And shoe impressions are, like other impressions, are class evidence, but we can help individualize impressions by using the tread pattern to help us find the brand of the shoe. That helps narrow it down a little bit. We can look for inclusions, which are pieces of trace evidence that get stuck in the sole of the shoe, and such as pebbles or glass that are going to make a unique mark. And then, of course, tears on the sole. We can also look at unusual wear patterns. That should be patterns, not patterns. And this would include someone that walks heavy to one side of their foot versus the other, somebody that wears out their heels because they drag their feet instead of making a full step, somebody that walks more on the ball of their foot. And we can see that kind of distribution of the wear because of that. And we can also figure out some information that from the footprint, such as the type of shoe, the type being a running shoe versus a dress shoe. Running shoe would probably be a little wider. Then we can figure out the brand of the shoe. A lot of brands now actually have their name or specific logo on their tread pattern, the model and the size of the shoe. And from that, we can get, from the size of the shoe, we can actually get height, an estimate of height, because it's related to foot size, but not definite. So sometimes that doesn't work. And we can also figure out the speed at which the person was moving, because somebody that's running versus walking is going to have a different footprint impression, as well as if we look at the stride marks. So somebody that is walking, their footprints are going to be spaced a little closer together than if they were running. Their stride's going to be a little longer, and they're going to be further apart. Now we can talk about collection, but we have to remember that we're talking about 3 different types of prints, and this is the same as we talked about with fingerprints. We have latent prints, which are hidden, patent prints, which are 2-dimensional because they were formed from stepping in one material and then transferring it to another area. And then there are plastic prints, which are 3D impressions. So if we're talking about latent prints, we would lift those, or make sure we have photographs of those. And of course, the first thing we always want to do with evidence is photograph. And we're going to take photographs from many different angles, and also up close and distance photos, because you need to see the striding patterns that I was talking about to see where they're spaced, and you need to find the angles. And then we can lift them. There's a couple of different methods that we're going to talk about with lifting either latent or patent impressions. And we would cast plastic impressions. And when we cast impressions, we're going to either use a plaster of Paris after we spray it with hairspray, or we're going to use dental stone if we're talking about the snow. So up here you can see this is what a 3D impression would look like. And this is a photograph. We'd always photograph first, and we'd use a scale. And then if we can take the object, so if this were a tile down here, we could actually just pick the tile up and bring it back to the lab. But if not, then we have to um, think about what we're going to do. Okay, are we going to lift it? Are we going to cast it? So remember, lift, latent, or patent, cast, plastic. Um, Now, this on the bottom is going to be a cast. Okay, this was cast. This would be considered a mold. This picture up here, this 3D impression, which would be a plastic print, and then we would cast it using the plaster. Now, to lift, there's a couple of different techniques. There's a phenomenon of why prints, these impressions are formed, and part of that is because there's static charges created, and you're deforming the surface that you're walking on. And then, of course, we can exchange materials between the shoe and the surface. But electrostatic lifting works by applying an electrostatic charge on a piece of lifting film, and then you take that film and put it over the print. And what happens is, just like you were to rub a balloon against your head and it's staticky, the film has that static charge now, and it's actually going to pick up and hold the dust in the same place that it was on the surface. We would use that for carpet, wood, or pavement. The other technique is gel lifting, which is using a gel adhesive or gel lifter, which is a thick gel that's sandwiched between a paper backing and a plastic cover sheet. It's kind of thin, flexible, and usually this is used on oily or moist surfaces. The print first gets dusted with powder, just like we did for fingerprints, and then the gel is pressed down over it, and you would lift that up, and we're going to use a photograph lifter to reveal the print. And we can also, what's unique about this, use it on paper besides those wet and moist surfaces. And then when we're casting, I mentioned two different types of casts. We use plaster of Paris for most plastic impressions. And first we would spray it with hairspray to help solidify the surface so that we don't obliterate it with the plaster. And then we would cast it using the plaster. The other method is dental stone, which is used in the snow. So if you find footprints in the snow and you want to cast them, you're actually going to spray a thin layer of snow wax. It's different than hairspray, it's more of a wax. And that would go on the print to hold it in place, and then you're going to pour the dental stone. And that doesn't solidify as quick as the plaster of Paris, so it's easier to use in the cold temperatures. So that is what you need to know about footwear marks. Understanding that there's many different kinds, and we can consider that footwear marks can be either class or individual evidence, depending on what we can see from the impression, and if there's specific individualized characteristics such as wear pattern or inclusions on the sole pattern.